Chapter 1, The Trafficker in His Own Honor. It was the day on which Colombe was to be presented to the Queen. The whole court was assembled in one of the state apartments at the Louvre. After hearing Mass, the court was to depart for Saint-Germain, and they were awaiting the coming of the King and Queen to go to the chapel. Except a few ladies who were seated, everybody was moving about from place to place, laughing and talking. There was a rustle of silks and brocades, and the clash of swords. Loving and defiant glances were exchanged, together with arrangements for future meetings of amorous or deadly purport. It was a dazzling, bewildering scene of confusion and splendor. The costumes were superb and cut in the latest style. Among them, adding to the rich and interesting variety, were pages, dressed in the Italian or Spanish fashion, standing like statues, with arms akimbo and swords at their sides. It was a picture overflowing with animation and magnificence, of which all that we could say would be but a very feeble and colorless description. Bring to life all the dandified, laughing cavaliers, all the sportive, easy-mannered ladies who figure in the pages of Brantome and the Heptameron, put in their mouths the crisp, clever, outspoken, idiomatic, eminently French speech of the 16th century, and you will have an idea of the seductive court, especially if you recall the saying of François I. A court without women is a year without spring, or a spring without flowers. The court of François I was a perpetual spring, where the loveliest and noblest of earthly flowers bloomed. After the first bewilderment caused by the confusion and uproar, it was easy to see that there were two hostile camps in the throng. One, distinguished by lilac favors, was that of Madame d'Etampes. The other, whose colors were blue, hoisted the flag of Diane de Poitiers. Those who secretly adhered to the Reformed religion belonged to the first faction, the unadulterated Catholics to the other. Among the latter could be seen the dull, uninteresting countenance of the Dauphin, the intelligent, winning, blonde features of Charles d'Orleans, the king's second son, flitted here and there through the ranks of the faction of Madame d'Etampes. Conceive these political and religious antipathies to be complicated by the jealousy of women and the rivalry of artists, and the result will be a grand total of hatred, which will sufficiently explain, if you are surprised at them, a myriad of scornful glances and threatening gestures, which all the courtier-like dissembling in the world cannot conceal from the observation of the spectator. The two deadly enemies, Anne and Diane, were seated at the opposite ends of the room, but, notwithstanding the distance between them, not 5 seconds elapsed before every stinging quip uttered by one of them found its way to the ears of the other, and the retort, forwarded by the same couriers, returned as quickly by the same road. They, too, talking together of momentous affairs of state, and stopping frequently to look each other in the face as if to give more weight to what they were saying, were old Montmorency, to whom the king had given less than 2 years before the office of constable, vacant since the fall of Bourbon, and the Chancellor, Poyet, bursting with pride over the new tax he had imposed, and the ordinance of Villas Cotterets, just countersigned by him. Mingling with none of the various groups, taking part in no conversation, the Benedictine and Cordelier Francois Rabelais, with a smile which showed his white teeth, watched and listened and sneered, while Triboulet, His Majesty's favorite jester, rolled his humpback and his biting jest around between the legs of the guests, taking advantage of his pygmy-like stature to bite here and there without danger, if not without pain. Clement Marot, resplendent in a brand-new coat as valet de chambre to the king, seemed fully as uncomfortable as on the day of his reception at the Hôtel d'Etampes. It was evident that he had in his pocket some poor fatherless sonnet, which he was seeking to dress in the guise of an impromptu conception. But alas! We all know that inspiration comes from on high, and we cannot control it. A ravishing idea had come to his mind unbidden upon the name of Madame Diane. He struggled against it. But the muse is a mistress, not a lover. The lines formed themselves without his assistance. The rhymes matched themselves to one another as if by some magic power which he could not control. In fine, the wretched verses tormented him more than we can say. He was devoted to Madame d'Etampes beyond question, and to Marguerite de Navarre. That, too, was incontestable, as was the fact that the Protestant party was the one toward which his sympathies leaned. It may even be that he was in search of an epigram against Madame Diane, when this madrigal and honor came to his mind. But come it did, and how, we pray to know, when such superb lines were revolved in his brain in laudation of a Catholic, Could he forbade, despite his zeal for the Protestant cause, to confide them in a whisper to some appreciative friend of literary tastes. That is what poor Marot did. But the injudicious Cardinal de Tournon, to whose bosom he entrusted his verses, deemed them so beautiful, so magnificent, that, in spite of himself, he passed them on to Emma Duc de Lorraine, who lost no time in telling Madame Diane of them. Instantly there was a great whispering among the partisans of the blue, in the midst of which Marot was imperatively summoned and called upon to repeat them. The lilacs, when they saw Marot making his way through the crowd toward Madame Diane, hastened in the same direction and crowded around the poet, enchanted and terrified at the same time. At last the Duchesse d'Etampes herself left her place, being curious, as she said, to see how that knave Marot, who had so much wit, would set about praising Madame Diane. Poor Clement Marot, as he was about to begin, after bowing low to Diane de Poitiers, who smiled upon him, turned his head slightly to glance about and caught the eye of Madame d'Etampes. She also smiled upon him, but the smile of the one was gracious, and of the other awe-inspiring. And so it was with a trembling and uncertain voice that poor Marot, burning up on one side and frozen on the other, repeated the following verses. Marot had barely littered the last syllable of this charming madrigal, when the blues applauded vociferously, while the lilacs preserved a deathly silence. Thereupon, emboldened by the applause on the one hand, and chagrined by the frigid reception accorded his effusion on the other, he boldly presented the chef d'oeuvre to Madame de Poitiers. To Diane the Fay, he said in an undertone, bowing to the ground before her, "You understand, Madame, fair in your own right and by contrast." Diane thanked him with the sweetest smile, and Marot turned away. One may venture to write verses in praise of a fair one, after having done the same in honor of the fairest, said the ill-fated poet apologetically as he passed Madame d'Etampes. "You remember, Madame, de France la plus belle," and replied with a withering glance. Two groups, composed of acquaintances of the reader, stood aloof from the throng during this incident. In one were Ascanio and Cellini. Benvenuto was weak enough to prefer the Divina Commedia to airy conceits. The other group consisted of Comte d'Aubec, the Vicomte de Montaigne, Messiah d'Iberville, and Colombe, who had implored her father not to mingle with the crowd, with which he then came in contact for the first time, and which caused a no other sensation than terror. Comte d'Aubec gallantly refused to leave his fiancée, who was to be presented by the provost to the Queen after Mass. Ascanio and Colombe, although they were equally bewildered by their strange surroundings, had spied each other at once, and from time to time stealthily exchanged glances. The two pure-hearted, timid children, both of whom had been reared in the solitude which makes noble hearts, would have been isolated and lost indeed in that gorgeous and corrupt throng had they not been so situated that they could see and thereby mutually strengthen and encourage each other. They had not met since the day they confessed their love. Half a score of times Ascanio had tried to gain admission to the Petit Nestle, but always in vain. The new servant, presented to Colombe by Comte d'Aubec, invariably answered his knock instead of Dame Perini, and dismissed him unceremoniously. Ascanio was neither rich enough nor bold enough to try to buy the woman. Furthermore, he had naught but sad news, which he would learn only too soon, to impart to his beloved. The news of the master's avowal of his own passion for Colombe, and the consequent necessity, not only of doing without his support, but perhaps of having to contend against him. As to the course to be pursued, Ascanio felt, as he had said to Cellini, that God alone could now save him, and being left to his own resources he had, in his innocence, resolved to attempt to soften Madame d'Etampes. When a hope upon which one has confidently relied is blasted, one is always tempted to have recourse to the most desperate expedients. The all-powerful energy of Benvenuto not only had failed Ascanio, but would undoubtedly be turned against him. Ascanio determined, therefore, with the trustfulness of youth, to appeal to what he believed he had discovered of grandeur and nobleness and generosity in the character of Madame d'Etampes, in an attempt to arouse the sympathy of her by whom he was beloved with his suffering. Afterward, if that last fragile branch slipped from his hand, what could he do, a poor, weak, friendless child? But wait, that was why he had accompanied Benvenuto to court. The Duchesse d'Etampes had returned to her place. He joined the throng of her courtiers, reach a position behind her, and finally succeeded in making his way to her chair. Chancing to turn her head, she saw him. "Ah, is it you, Ascanio?" she said coldly. "Yes, Madame la Duchesse. I came hither with my master, Benvenuto, and my excuse for venturing to address you is my desire to know if you were hopelessly dissatisfied with the drawing of the lily which you kindly ordered me to prepare, and which I left at the Hotel d'Étampes the other day." "No, in very truth, I think it most beautiful," said Madame d'Étampes, somewhat mollified, "and connoisseurs to whom I have shown it, notably Monsieur de Guise here, are entirely of my opinion. But will the completed work be as perfect as the drawing? And if you think that you can promise that it will my gems be sufficient?" "Yes, Madame, I hope so. I should have liked, however, to place on the heart of the flower a large diamond, which would glisten there like a drop of dew. But it would be too great an expense perhaps to incur for a work entrusted to an humble artist like myself." "Oh, we can indulge in that extravagance, Ascanio. But a diamond of that size would be worth some 200,000 crowns, Madam." "I am at your service, Madam." A moment since, while listening to Marot's insipid trash, I spied Comte d'Elbec at the other end of the room. "Find him out, if you please, and say to him that I would speak with him." "What, Madam?" exclaimed Ascanio, turning pale at the Count's name. "Did you not say that you were at my service?" Continued Madame d'Étampes haughtily. "Moreover, my reason for asking you to undertake this commission is that you are interested in the subject of the conversation I wish to have with Comte d'Elbec, and it may well give you food for reflection, if they who are in love do ever reflect." "I will obey you, Madam," said Ascanio, apprehensive lest he should displease her whose hands he hoped to obtain salvation. "Very good. Pray address the Count in Italian. I have my reason for requesting you to do so, and return to me with him." Ascanio, to avoid the danger of any further collision with his redoubtable foe, walked away and asked a young nobleman wearing a lilac favor if he had seen Comte d'Elbec and where he was. "There he is," was the reply, "that old ape whispering with the Provost of Paris, and standing so near that lovely girl." The lovely girl was Colombe, at whom all the dandies were gazing with admiring curiosity. The old ape seemed to Ascanio as repulsive a creature as a rival could desire. After scrutinizing him for a moment, he walked up to him, and to Colombe's unbounded amazement accosted him in Italian, requesting him to go with himself to Madame d'Étampes. The Count excused himself to his fiancée and friends, and made haste to obey the Duchess's command, followed by Ascanio, who did not take his leave until he had bestowed a significant, reassuring glance upon poor Colombe, who were confounded by the extraordinary message, and more than all else by the sight of the messenger. "Who is this young man?" queried the Count. "An Italian page who does not understand a word of French. You may speak before him exactly as if we were alone." "Very well, Madam," rejoined d'Elbec. "I have obeyed your orders blindly, without even seeking to know your motives. You express a wish that my future wife should be presented to the Queen today. Colombe is here with her father. But now that I have complied with your command, I confess that I should be glad to understand it. Do I presume too much, Madam, in asking you for some little explanation? You are the most devoted of my faithful friends, d'Elbec. Happily there is still much I can do for you, but I do not know if I shall ever be able to pay my debt to you. However, I will try. This treasurership which I have given you is simply the cornerstone upon which I propose to build your fortune, Count." "Madam," said d'Elbec, bowing to the ground. "Dame, one must settle down, Madam, and the father is an old villain who has ducats to leave to his daughter." "Oh, some 55 or 6 years." "About the same age, but he is so used up. I begin to understand, and to recognize your fine hand. I knew that you were above me vulgar sentiment, and that yonder child's fascinations did not constitute the attraction for you." "Oh, that's all right, Count, otherwise I should despair of you. And now that you have found me, Madam, will you deign to inform me?" "Oh, it is simply that I am indulging in some beautiful dreams for you, the Duchess interposed. Where I would like to see you, Dorbeck, do you know, is in Poyet's place, for I detest him, she added, with a malevolent glance at the Chancellor, who was still walking with the constable. What, madam, one of the most exalted posts in the realm. Well, are you not yourself an eminent man, Count? But alas, my powers are precarious. My throne is upon the brink of an abyss. Even at this moment I am in mortal terror. The king has for a mistress the wife of a nobody, a petty judge named Farron. If the woman were ambitious, we should be ruined. I ought to have taken the initiative myself, in this whim of his Majesty's. Ah, I shall never find another like the little Duchesse de Brissac, whom I presented to him, a sweet woman of no force of character, a mere child. I shall always weep for her. She was not dangerous, and talked to the king of nothing but my perfections. Poor Marie, she assumed all the burdens of my position, and left me all the benefits. But this Ferronier, as they call her, why, it requires all my power to draw Francois away from her. I have exhausted my whole arsenal of seductions, and am driven, alas, to my last entrenchment, habit. How so, madam? Mon Dieu. Yes, I devote myself almost exclusively to his mind now, for his heart is elsewhere. You can understand how much I need an auxiliary. Where can I find her? A devoted, sincere friend, of whom I can be sure. Ah, I would repay her with such quantities of gold and such a host of honors. Seek out such a one for me. Dorbeck, you know how closely the king and the man are allied in the person of our sovereign, and to what lengths the man can lead the king on, if we could be, not rivals but allies, not mistresses but friends. If my one held sway over Francois, the other might hold sway over Francois, France would be ours, Count, and at what a moment, just as Charles V is about to plunge into our net of his own free will, when we can hold him to ransom on such terms as we choose, and take advantage of his imprudence to assure ourselves a magnificent future in case of accident. I will explain my plans to you, Dorbeck. This Diane who pleases you so much would no longer threaten our fortunes, and the Chevalier de France might become. But here's the king. Such was the way of Madame d'Etampes. She rarely explained her meaning, but left it to be guessed. She would sow ideas in a man's mind, and set avarice, ambition, and natural perversity at work, and then she would conveniently interrupt herself. A great and useful art, which cannot be too highly commended to many poets and innumerable lovers. So it was that Comte d'Orbeck, eager in the pursuit of gain and honors, corrupt to the last degree and worn out by years and dissipation, perfectly understood the Duchess, whose eyes more than once during the interview had wandered toward Colombe. Ascanio's noble and straightforward nature was quite incapable of sounding the depths of this mystery of iniquity and infamy, but he had a vague foreboding that this strange and ominous conversation concealed some terrible peril for his beloved, and he gazed at Madame d'Etampes in terror. An usher announced the king and queen. In an instant everybody was standing, hat in hand. God have you in his keeping, Messrs, said Francois as he entered the room. I have some weighty news which I must make known to you at once. Our dear brother, the Emperor Charles V, is at this moment en route for France, if he has not already passed the frontier. Let us prepare, Messrs, to welcome him worthily. I need not remind my loyal nobility of the obligations imposed upon us by the laws of hospitality at such a time. We prove at the Field of the Cloth of Gold that we knew how kings should be received. Within the month Charles V will be at the Louvre. And I, my lords, said Queen Eleanor in her sweet voice, thank you in advance in my royal brother's name for the welcome you will accord him. The nobles replied with shouts of Vive le Roi, Vive la Reina, Vive l'Empereur. At that moment something wriggled its way along between the legs of the courtiers toward the king. It was Triboulet. Sire, said the fool, will you permit me to dedicate to your majesty a work I am about to print? With all the pleasure in the world, fool, the king replied, but I must first know the title of the work and how far advanced it is. Sire, the work will be entitled The Almanac of Fools, and will contain a list of the greatest idiots that the world has ever seen. As to the progress I have made with it, I have already inscribed upon the first page the name of the king of all fools past and to come. Who might this illustrious worthy be, whom you give me for cousin and select for king of fools? Charles V, sire, Charles V, cried the king. And why Charles V? Because there is no other than Charles V in the world, who, after detaining you a prisoner at Madrid as he did, would be insane enough to pass through your majesty's dominions. But suppose that he does pass through the very heart of my dominions without accident. In that case, said Triboulet, I promise to erase his name and put another in its place. Whose name will that be? Queried the king. Yours, sire, for in allowing him to pass you will show yourself a greater fool than he. The king roared with laughter. The courtiers echoed his merriment. Poor Eleonora alone turned pale. Very good, said Francois. Put my name in place of the emperor's at once, for I have given my word of honor, and I'll stand to it. As to the dedication, I accept it, and here is the price of the first copy that appease. With that the king tossed a well-filled purse to Triboulet, who caught it in his teeth and hopped away on all fours, growling like a dog with a bone. Madam, said the provost of Paris to the queen, as he stepped forward with Colombe, will your majesty permit me to avail myself of this joyful moment to present to you under happy auspices my daughter Colombe, whom you have condescended to receive as one of your maids of honor? The kindly queen addressed a few words of congratulation and encouragement to poor abashed Colombe, at whom the king meanwhile was gazing in admiration. By my halidome, Messire le Prévôt, said Francois, smiling, do you know that it's nothing less than high treason to have kept such a pearl so long buried and out of sight, a pearl so well adapted to shine in the garland of beauties who surround the majesty of our queen? If you are not punished for the felony, Messire Robert, you may thank the mute intercession of those lovely downcast eyes. Thereupon the king, with a graceful salutation to the charming girl, passed on to the chapel followed by the whole court. Madam, said the Duke of Medina-Sidonia, offering his hand to the Duchesse d'Etampes, shall we not allow the throng to pass and remain a little behind? We shall be more conveniently situated here than elsewhere for a word or two of importance which I have to say to you in private. I am at your service, Monsieur l'Ambassadeur, replied the Duchess. Do not go, Comte d'Aubec. You may say anything, Monsieur de Medina, before this old friend, who is my second self, and this young man, who speaks nothing but Italian. Their discretion is of no less consequence to you than to me, madam, and if you feel sure of them. But we are alone, and I will go straight to the point without digression or concealment. You understand that His Sacred Majesty has determined to pass through France, that he is in all probability already within her boundaries. He is well aware, however, that his path lies between two long lines of enemies, but he relies upon the chivalrous loyalty of the king. You have yourself advised him so to rely, madam, and I frankly admit that, having vastly more power than any titular minister, you have enough influence over Francois to set a trap for the emperor or guarantee his safety, according as your advice is friendly or unfriendly. Go on, Monseigneur. You have not said all that you have to say, I fancy. No, madam. Charles V is a worthy successor of Charlemagne, and what a disloyal ally might demand from him as ransom he proposes to bestow as a gift, and to leave neither hospitality nor friendly counsel unrewarded. Superb, he will act with no less discretion than grandeur. King Francois has always ardently desired the Duchy of Milan, madam, and Charles will consent to see that province, a never-ending subject of contention between France and Spain, in consideration of an annual rent charge. My influence is not merchandise to be bought and sold, Monsieur l'Ambassadeur. Oh, madam, who implied such a thing? Hark ye, you assure me that your master desires my support, and between ourselves he is wise. Very well. To promise it to him I demand less than he offers. Follow me closely. This is what he must do. He must promise Francois the investiture of the Duchy of Milan, but as soon as he has left France behind, he must remember the violated Treaty of Madrid and forget his promise. Why, that would mean war, madam. As to any personal desires I may have, as you suggested a moment since, if His Sacred Majesty enters into my plans, he may let fall in my presence, at our first interview, a bauble of more or less brilliancy, which I will pick up, if it is worth the trouble, and retain as a souvenir of the glorious alliance concluded between the successor of the Caesars, King of Spain and the Indies, and myself. The Duchess turned to Ascanio, who was as terrified by dark and mysterious schemes as the Duke of Medina was disturbed by them, and as Comte d'Olbeck seemed delighted. If it will set your mind at rest, I will say to you that it is in reality equally favorable to me, and that is why I undertake to make the king accept it. We women have our own political schemes, more profound sometimes than yours, but I can promise you that mine are in no wise inimical to your interests. Indeed, how could they be? Meanwhile, however, pending the decision of Charles V, you may be sure that I shall not lose an opportunity to act against him, and that I shall do my utmost to induce His Majesty to detain him as a prisoner. What? Madam, is this your way of beginning an alliance? Go to Monsieur l'Ambassadeur. Can a statesman like yourself fail to see that the most essential thing for me is to put aside all suspicion of undue influence, and that to espouse your cause openly would be the surest method of ruining it? Moreover, I do not propose that anyone shall ever be able to betray me or denounce me. Let me be your enemy, Monsieur le Duc, and let me talk against you. What does it matter to you? Do you not know what my words amount to? If Charles V refuses to accept my terms, I will say to the king, Sire, trust in my generous womanly instinct. You must not recoil before just and necessary reprisals. And if the emperor accepts, I will say, Sire, trust in my feminine, that is to say, feline sharpness. You must resign yourself to commit an infamous but advantageous act. Ah, madam, said the Duke of Medina, bowing low, what a pity it is that you should be a queen. You would have made such a perfect ambassador. With that the Duke took leave of Madame d'Etampes and walked away, enchanted with the unexpected turn the negotiations had taken. Now it is my purpose to speak plainly and without circumlocution, said the Duchess to Comte d'Olbeck, when she was alone with Ascanio and him. You know 3 things, Count. First, that it is most important for my friends and myself that my power should at this moment be put beyond question and beyond the reach of attack. Secondly, that when this arrangement is once carried through, we shall have no occasion to dread the future, that Charles d'Orleans will fill the place of Francois I, and that the Duke of Milan, whom I shall have made what he is, will owe me much more gratitude than the King of France, who has made me what I am. Thirdly, that your Colombe's beauty has made a vivid impression upon His Majesty. Very well. I address myself now, Count, to the superior individual, who is not influenced by vulgar prejudices. You hold your fate in your own hands at this moment. Do you choose that Trésorier d'Olbeck should succeed Chancellor Poyet, or, in more positive terms, that Colombe d'Olbeck should succeed Marie de Brissac? Ascanio in his horror made a movement which d'Olbeck did not notice, as he met the searching gaze of Madame d'Etampes with a villainous leer. Good. Then we are both saved. But what of the provost? Oh, said the Count, you can find some fat office for him. Only let it be lucrative rather than honorable, I beg. It will all fall to me when the gouty old rascal dies. Ascanio could contain himself no longer. Madam, he exclaimed in a voice of thunder, stepping forward. He had no time to say more. The Count had no time to be astonished, for the folding doors were thrown open and the whole court flocked in. Madame d'Etampes roughly seized Ascanio's hand and drew him aside with her, as she said in his ear, in a suppressed voice, trembling with passion, Now do you see, young man, how one becomes a king's plaything, and whither life sometimes leads us, in our own despite. Francois I was radiant, for Charles V was coming. There would be receptions, fetes, surprises, a glorious part for him to play. The whole world would have its eyes fixed upon Paris and its king. He looked forward with childish joy to the performance of the drama of which he held all the threads. It was his nature to look at everything on the brilliant rather than on the serious side, to aim more at effect than anything else, and to look upon battles as tournaments and upon royalty as an art, with a mind well stored with strange, poetic, adventurous ideas. Francois made of his reign a theatrical performance, with a world for playhouse. On this day, as he was on the eve of dazzling arrival in Europe. His clemency and benignity were more charming than ever. As if reassured by his smiling face, Triboulet rolled up to him just as he passed through the door. "What? You are going to leave me, fool, at this moment when there is but one fool for two kings." "Yes, sire, at this moment, when there are two kings for one fool. But I do not propose to have it so. Triboulet, I order you to remain." "In that case, pray see that Monsieur de Vieilleville is informed of your royal pleasure, for I but told him what people say of his wife, and for so simple a matter he swore that he would cut off my ears in the first place, and then tear out my soul, if I had one," added the impious villain, "whose tongue your majesty should order to be cut out for such blasphemy." "Lao, Lao," rejoined the king, "have no fear, my poor fool. The man who should take your life will be very sure to be hanged a quarter of an hour after." "Oh, sire, if it makes no difference to you." "Well, what? Have him hanged a quarter of an hour before. I much prefer that." The whole assemblage roared with laughter, the king above all the others. As he walked on, he passed Pietro Strozzi, the noble Florentine exile. "Messiah Antoine Le Macon, you will see that letters of naturalization are issued to my good friend Benvenuto at the same time with the great Pietro Strozzi's, and you will issue them without expense to him. A goldsmith cannot put his hand upon 500 ducats so readily as a Strozzi." "Sire," said Benvenuto, "I thank your majesty, but I pray you to forgive my ignorance. What are these letters of naturalization?" "What?" exclaimed Antoine Le Macon, with great gravity, while the king laughed like a madman at the question. "Do you not know, Master Benvenuto, that letters of naturalization are the greatest honor His Majesty can bestow upon a foreigner, that you thereby become a Frenchman?" "I begin to understand, sire, and I thank you again," said Cellini. "But pardon me, as I am already at heart your Majesty's subject. Of what use are these letters?" "Of what use are the letters?" rejoined Francois, still in the best of humor. "Why, they are of this use, Benvenuto, that now that you are a Frenchman, I can make you Seigneur du Grand Nestle, which was not possible before. Messer Le Macon, you will add to the letters of naturalization the definitive deed of the shadow. Do you understand now, Benvenuto, of what use the letters of naturalization are?" "Yes, sire, and I thank you 1,000 times. One would say that our hearts understood each other without words, for this favor which you bestow upon me today is a step toward a very, very great favor which I shall perhaps dare to ask at your hand some day, and is, so to say, a part of it. You know what I promised you, Benvenuto. Bring me my Jupiter, and ask what you will." "Yes, your majesty has a good memory, and I hope your word will prove to be as good. Yes, your majesty, you have it in your power to gratify a wish, upon which my life in a measure depends, and you have already, by a sublime instinct worthy of a king, made its gratification more easy. It shall be done, my eminent artist, according to your wish, but, meanwhile, allow us to see what you have in your hands." "It is a silver salt dish, sire, to go with the ewer and the basin." The king scrutinized, carefully and silently as always, the marvelous piece of work which Cellini handed him. "What, sire?" cried Benvenuto, disappointed beyond measure. "Your majesty is not pleased with it." "Alas, sire," said Benvenuto sadly, "be not so ambitious for my poor works. The richness of the material will destroy these treasures of my thought, I greatly fear. More lasting glory is to be attained by working in clay than in gold, sire, and the names of us goldsmiths survive us but a little while. Necessity is sometimes a cruel master, sire, and men are always greedy and stupid. Who can say that a silver cup for which your majesty would give 10,000 ducats might not be melted down for 10 crowns? Sire, the Emperor of Constantinople pawned our Saviour's crown of thorns with the Venetians." "Very true, but think of the possible risks, revolution, and exile. I come from a country whence the Medicis have been thrice expelled and thrice recalled, and it is only kings like your majesty, who are glorious in themselves, from whom their treasures cannot be taken away." "No matter, Benvenuto, no matter. I desire my salt dish in gold, and my treasurer will hand you today 1,000 gold crowns of the old weight for that purpose. You hear, Comte d'Aubec, today, for I do not wish Cellini to lose a minute. Adieu, Benvenuto. Go on with your work. The king does not forget his Jupiter. Adieu, Messrs. Think of Charles V. Benvenuto walked up to Comte d'Aubec and said to him, "Be good enough to have the gold ready for me, Messire le Trésorier. In obedience to His Majesty's commands, I go at once to my house for a bag, and shall be at your office in a half-hour." The Count bowed in token of acquiescence, and Cellini took his departure alone, after looking around in vain for Ascanio. At the same time, Armane was speaking in an undertone with the provost, who still held Colombo's hand. "This is a magnificent opportunity," he said, "and I shall go at once and summon my men. Do you tell d'Aubec to detain Cellini as long as possible." With that he disappeared, and Messire d'Esterville went to d'Aubec and whispered a few words in his ear, after which he said aloud, "Meanwhile, Count, I will take Colombe back to the Hotel de Nesle." "Very good," said d'Aubec, "and come and let me know the result this evening." Meanwhile, the king was mounting a superb sorrel, his favorite steed, presented to him by Henry VIII. "We are to make a long journey together today," he said. Marot scratched his head, but Saint-Gelais anticipated him, and with extraordinary promptness and success continued. He was applauded on all sides, and the king, already in the saddle, waved his hand gracefully in acknowledgment of the poet's swift and happy inspiration. Marot returned to the apartments of the Queen of Navarre, more out of sorts than ever. "I don't know what the matter was with them at court today," he grumbled, "but they were all extremely stupid." The visitor may still see those two letters, masterpieces of the Renaissance, connected, and note as well, for the spirit of the time is epitomized in this lapidary fact, connected by a lover's knot, which includes also the crescent of Diane de Poitiers, a charming, but, we must agree, a strange trilogy, which consists of the cipher and arm of the husband, the wife, and the mistress. See Marot de Marot. Chapter 2. Varieties of Brigands. Benvenuto crossed the Seine in all haste, and procured, not a bag as he had told Comte d'Aubec that he should, but a small wicker basket given him by one of his cousins, a nun at Florence. As he was determined to make an end of the affair that day, and it was already 2 o'clock, he did not wait for Ascanio, whom he had completely lost sight of, nor his workmen, who had gone to dinner, but started at once for Rue Freud-Manteau, where Comte d'Aubec had his official residence. And although he kept his eyes open, he saw nothing on the way to cause him the least uneasiness. When he reached the treasurer's abode, that dignitary informed him that he could not deliver his gold to him at once, as there were certain indispensable formalities to be gone through with, a notary to be summoned, and a contract to be drawn up. The Count apologized with 1,000 expressions of regret, knowing Cellini's impatient nature, and was so courteous withal it was impossible to be angry, and Benvenuto resigned himself to wait, believing in the reality of these obstacles to a speedy delivery of the gold. Cellini desired to take advantage of the delay to send for some of his workmen, that they might accompany him home and help him to carry the gold. d'Aubec quickly volunteered to send one of his servants to the Hotel de Nesle with the message. Then he led the conversation around to Cellini's work, and the king's evident partiality for him. To anything in short likely to incline Benvenuto to be patient, which was a less difficult of accomplishment, as he had no reason for wishing ill to the Count, and no suspicion that the Count had any reason for being hostile to him. There was his desire to supplant him with Colombe, but no one knew of that desire save Ascanio and himself. He therefore met the treasurer's friendly overtures graciously enough. Further time was necessary to select gold of the degree of fineness which the king desired him to have. The notary was very slow in coming. A contract is not drawn up in a moment. In short, when, after the final exchange of courtesies, Benvenuto made ready to return to his studio, night was beginning to fall. He questioned the servant who was sent for his companions, and was told that they were unable to come, but that he would gladly carry the gold for him. Benvenuto's suspicions were aroused, and he declined the offer, courteous as it was. He placed the gold in his little basket, then passed his arm through the two handles, and as there was barely room for his arm, The cover was securely pressed down, and he carried it much more easily than if it had been in a bag. He had a stout coat of mail with sleeves beneath his coat, a short sword at his side, and a dagger in his belt. He set out on his homeward journey at a quick pace, but cautiously nevertheless. Just before he started, he noticed several servants speaking together in low tones, and that they left the house in a great hurry, but they made a show of going in a different direction from that taken by him. Today, when one can go from the Louvre to the Institute by the Pont des Arts, Benvenuto's homeward journey would be but a stride, but at that time it was a long walk. He was obliged, starting from Rue Freud-Manteau, to follow the quay as far as the Châtelet, cross the Pont des Meuniers, go across the city by Rue Saint-Barthélemy, cross to the left bank by the Pont Saint-Michel, and from there go down the river to the Grand Nestle by the deserted quay. The reader need not wonder that, in those days of thieves and cutthroats, Benvenuto, notwithstanding his courage, felt some anxiety touching so considerable a sum as that he carried upon his arm. And if he will go forward with us 200 or 300 yards in advance of Benvenuto, he will see that his anxiety was not unjustifiable. When it began to grow dark, about an hour before, for men of forbidding appearance, wrapped in great cloaks, stationed themselves upon the Quai des Augustins, at a point abreast of the church. The river bank was bordered with walls only at that spot, and was absolutely deserted at that moment. While they stood there, they saw no one pass but the provost, on his way back to the Châtelet after escorting Colombe to the Petit Nestle, and him they saluted with the respect due the constituted authorities. They were talking in low tones in a recess formed by the church, and their hats were pulled well down over their eyes. 2 of them are already known to us, the bravos employed by Vicomte de Mamaine in his ill-fated expedition against the Grand Nestle. Their names were Ferrante and Fracasso. Their companions, who earned their livelihood at the same honorable calling, were named Procope and Maildent. In order that posterity may not quarrel over the nationality of these 4 valiant captains, as it has done for 3,000 years over that of old Homer, we will add that Maildent was a Picard, Procope a Bohemian, and that Ferrante and Fracasso first saw the light beneath the soft skies of Italy. As to their distinctive callings in time of peace, Procope was a jurist, Ferrante a pedant, Fracasso a dreamer of dreams, and Maildent a fool. It will be seen that the fact that we are ourselves a Frenchman does not blind us to the character of the only one of these 4 toilers who happened to be our compatriot. In battle all forward demons. Let us listen for a moment to their friendly and edifying conversation. We may be able to judge there from what manner of men they were, and what danger was impending over our good friend Benvenuto. At all events, Fracasso, said Ferrante, we shan't be hampered today with that great red-faced Viscount, and our poor sword can leave their scabbards without his crying, retreat, the coward, and forcing us to turn tail. Very true, rejoined Fracasso, but as he leaves us all the risk of the combat, for which I thank him, he ought to leave us all the profit too. By what right does the red-haired devil reserve 500 crowns for his own part? I admit that the 500 that remain make a very pretty prize. 125 for each of us does us honor. Indeed, when times are hard, I sometimes find it necessary to kill a man for 2 crowns. What would you have, Maildent? Said Fracasso, in a melancholy tone. Life has its crosses, and there are times when one would kill a man for a bit of bread. It seems to me, my good friends, that 250 crowns are worth just twice as much as 125. Suppose that after we have killed our man, we refuse to settle with that great thief of a Mamaine. You forget, brother, rejoined Procope seriously, that would be to disregard our agreement, to defraud our patron, and we must be loyal in everything. Let us hand the Viscount the 500 crowns to the last sou, as agreed. That is my advice. But distinguamus, let us make a distinction. When he has pocketed them, and when he realizes that we are honorable men, I fail to see why we shouldn't fall upon him and take them from him. Well thought of, exclaimed Ferrante in a judicial tone. Procope was always distinguished for uprightness of character conjoined with a vivid imagination. But, continued Ferrante, with the air of pedantry which was habitual to him, let us not involve ourselves in too many plans at once. Secti ad terminum imus. Let the Viscount sleep in peace. His turn will come. This Florentine goldsmith is the one we have to deal with at the moment. For greater security, it was desired that 4 of us should set upon him. Strictly speaking, one only should have done the deed and pocketed the price. But the concentration of capital is a social plague, and tea is much better that the money be divided among several friends. Let us dispatch him swiftly and cleanly. He is no ordinary man, as Fracasso and I have learned. Let us resign ourselves, therefore, for greater security, to attack him all 4 at once. This is very interesting, interposed Ferrante. Go on, Maldent. How can we better employ this period of waiting to perform one exploit than in listening to tales of other feats of arms? Go on. At last that devil of a father, in order to show the youngsters how to carry away a visor, took a lance himself, and at the first blow uncovered my pale and terrified face. I thought I was lost. Very good. But the important thing in our trade, friend Maldent, said Procope, is not only to receive blows manfully, but to deal them handsomely. It's a fine thing when the victim falls without a sound. In one of my expeditions in Flanders, I had to rid one of my customers of 4 of his intimate friends who were traveling in company. He proposed at first that I should take 3 comrades, but I told him that I would undertake it alone, or not at all. It was agreed that I should do as I chose, and that I should have the stipend 4 times over provided that I delivered 4 dead bodies. I knew the road they were to take, and I awaited their coming at an in which they must of necessity pass. The first who entered was so slow about coming out that the second lost patience and went to see what he was doing. He also was in no hurry to reappear, whereupon the third, weary of waiting, followed the other 2. After some little time, as the fourth was expressing his astonishment at their delay, mine host remarked, "Ah, I see what it is. The stable is so extremely small that they have gone out through the door at the rear." This explanation encouraged my last man to join his companions and myself, for you will have guessed that I was in the stable. I allowed him, however, the satisfaction of uttering one little cry, to say farewell to the world, as there was no longer any danger. In Roman law, Ferrante, would not that he called trucidatio per divisionum nessus? But, deuce take it, added Procope, changing his tone, our man doesn't come. God grant that nothing has happened to him. It will be pitch dark very soon. Suadent cadentia sedera somnos, added Fracasso. And by the way, my friends, take care that Benvenuto doesn't in the dark resort to a trick which I once put in practice myself. It was during my sojourn on the banks of the Rhine. I always loved the banks of the Rhine. The country there so picturesque and at the same time so melancholy. The Rhine is the river of dreamers. I was dreaming then upon the banks of the Rhine, and this was the subject of my dreams. I donned a costume like that worn by him, and one dark evening I lay in wait for him and his escort. When I saw them coming through the solitude and darkness, obscuri sub nacht, I made a desperate attack upon Schreckenstein, who was walking a little ahead, but I was clever enough to strike off his hat with its waving plumes, and then to change my position so that I was standing where he should have been. Thereupon I stunned him with a violent blow with my sword hilt, and began to shout amid the clashing of swords and the shouts of the others, "Help! Help! Death to the brigands!" so that Schreckenstein's men fell furiously upon their master, and left him dead upon the spot, while I glided away into the bushes. The worthy nobleman could at least say that he was killed by his friends. They stood without speaking or moving. Their dark, threatening faces could not be distinguished in the gathering gloom, but one might have seen their gleaming eyes, their hands playing nervously with their rapiers, and their attitude of breathless suspense. In the half-darkness they formed a striking dramatic group, which no pencil but silver-toe roses could adequately reproduce. It was in fact Benvenuto coming on at a rapid pace. As we have said, his suspicions were aroused, and with his piercing glance he maintained a constant watch in the darkness. As his eyes were accustomed to the uncertain light, he saw the 4 bandits issue from their ambush when he was still 20 yards away, and had time to throw his cloak over his basket and draw his sword before they were upon him. Furthermore, with a self-possession which never abandoned him, he backed against the church wall, and thus faced all his assailants. They attacked him savagely. He could not retreat, and it was useless to cry out as the chateau was 500 yards away. But Benvenuto was no novice in deeds of arms, and he received the cutthroats with vigor. "What fit has seized you, my fine fellows? Are you mad? What do you expect to make out of an old soldier like me? Is it my cloak that you want? Does my sword tempt you? Stay, stay, you. If you want my good sword, you must earn it. Send you, by my soul, for thieves who seem to have served their apprenticeship, your scent is bad, my children." "I fear so. The man seemed not so tall to me. Or even if it is he hasn't the gold, and that damn Viscount deceived us." "I have gold," cried Benvenuto, thrusting and parrying vigorously all the while. "I have no gold save a handful of gilded copper. But if you are ambitious to secure that, my children, you will pay dearer for it than if it were gold belonging to another, I promise you." "Deuce take him," said Procope. "He's really a soldier. Could any goldsmith fence so cleverly as he? Expend all your wind on him, if you choose. You fellows, I don't lie for glory." And Procope began to heat a retreat, grumbling to himself, while the attack of the others relaxed in vigor by reason of their doubts, as well as of his absence. Benvenuto, with no such motive for weakening, seized the opportunity to drive them back, and to start for the chateau, backing before his assailants, but fighting all the time, and defending himself manfully. The savage bull was luring the hounds with him to his den. "Come, my brave fellows, come with me," he said. "Bear me company as far as the entrance to the pre-auxiliary clerks, the Maison Rouge, where my sweetheart, whose father sells wine, is expecting me tonight. The road isn't very safe, so they say, and I should be glad to have an escort." "We are fools, Ferrante," said Maledent. "This isn't your Benvenuto." Yes, I say it is himself," cried Ferrante, who had at last discovered the basket bulging out with money under Benvenuto's arm, as a too sudden movement disarranged his cloak. Fracasso had barely time to retrace his steps, Procope to hasten up, and Ferrante and Maledent to redouble their efforts. The workmen who were expecting their master were on the alert. The door of the chateau was flung open at his first shout, and Herman the Colossus, Little Jehan, Simon Lagosha, and Yak Aubrey came running out armed with pikes. At that sight the bravos turned and fled. Wait, my dear young friends," Benvenuto shouted to the fugitives. "Won't you escort me a little farther? Oh, the bunglers, who couldn't take from one loanman 1,000 golden crowns which tired his arm." The brigands had in fact succeeded in inflicting no other injury than a slight scratch upon their opponent's hand, and they made their escape shamefaced, and Fracasso howling with pain. Poor Fracasso at the very last lost his right eye, and was one-eyed for the rest of his days, a circumstance which accentuated the tinge of melancholy which was the most prominent characteristic of his pensive countenance. "I know where he is," said Little John. "Where is he, my boy?" asked Benvenuto. "Down at the end of the garden, where he has been walking for half an hour. The student and I went there to talk with him, but he begged us to leave him alone." "Strange," said Benvenuto. "How did he fail to hear my shout? How is it that he did not hasten to me with the others? Do not wait for me, but sup without me, my children. Ah, there you are, Scott's own. Oh, mon Dieu, what is this they tell me, that someone tried to murder you, master?" "It was nothing, my dear girl, nothing," said Benvenuto consolingly, for poor Catherine had become as pale as death. "Go now and bring wine, of the best, for these gallant fellows. Take the keys of the cellar from Dame Ruperta, Scott's own, and select it yourself." "Why, you are not going out again," said Scott's own. "No, never fear. I am going to find Ascanio in the garden. I have important matters to discuss with him." Scott's own and the others returned to the studio, and Benvenuto walked toward the gate leading to the garden. The moon was just rising, and the master saw Ascanio very plainly. But instead of walking, the young man was climbing a ladder set against the wall between the gardens of the Grand and Petit Nestle. When he reached the top, He pulled the ladder up after him, lowered it on the other side, and disappeared. Benvenuto passed his hand over his eyes like a man who cannot believe what he sees. Forming a sudden resolution, he went straight to the foundry and up into his cell, stepped to the window-sill, and leaped to the wall of the pettinessel. From there, with the aid of a stout vine, he dropped noiselessly into Colombe's garden. It had rained in the morning, and the ground was so damp that his footfalls were deadened. He put his ear to the ground and questioned the silence for some moments. At last he heard subdued voices in the distance, which guided his steps. He at once rose and crept cautiously forward, feeling his way and stopping from moment to moment. Soon the voices became more distinct. Benvenuto walked toward them, and at last, when he reached the second path which crossed the garden, he recognized Colombe, or rather divined her presence in the shadow, dressed in white, and sitting beside Ascanio on the bench we already know. They were talking in low tones, but distinctly and with animation. Chapter 3, An Autumn Night's Dream. It was a beautiful autumn evening, calm and clear. The moon had driven away almost all the clouds, and the few which remained were scattered here and there over the star-strewn sky. Around the group talking and listening in the garden of the pettinessel, everything was calm and silent, but within their hearts all was sadness and agitation. "My darling Colombe," said Ascanio, while Benvenuto, standing cold and pale behind him, seemed to be listening with his heart rather than with his ears. "My dearest love, why, alas, did our paths meet? When you know all that I have to tell you of misery and horror, you will curse me for being the bearer of such news." "Nay, my dear," replied Colombe, "whatever you may have to tell me, I shall bless you, for in my eyes you are as one sent by God. I never heard my mother's voice, but I feel that I should have listened to her as I listened to you. Go on, Ascanio, and if you have terrible things to tell me, your voice will at least comfort me a little." "Summon all your courage and all your strength," said Ascanio. Thereupon he told her all that had taken place in his presence between Madame d'Etampes and Comte d'Ubec. He described the whole plot, a combination of treason against the kingdom and designs upon the honor of an innocent child. He subjected himself to the agony of explaining the infamous bargain made by the treasurer to that ingenuous soul, aghast at this revelation of wickedness. He must needs to make the maiden, whose heart was so pure that she did not blush at his words, understand the cruel refinements of torture and ignominy which hatred and baffled love suggested to the favorite. All that was perfectly clear to Colombe's mind was that her lover was filled with loathing and dismay, and, like the slender vine which has no other support than the sapling to which it clings, she trembled and shuddered with him. "Alas," was Ascanio's only reply. "Oh, my love," cried Colombe, who understood all the apprehension contained in her lover's exclamation. "Oh, can you suspect my father of complicity in so hateful a design? That would be too wicked, Ascanio. No, my father knows nothing, suspects nothing, I am sure, and although he has never shown me any great affection, he would never with his own hand plunge me into shame and misery. I beg you to forgive me, my beloved, for bringing your chaste and spotless soul so abruptly in contact with this hideous reality, but I cannot avoid the necessity of showing you the snare that is laid for you." "Why not?" whispered the girl. Thereupon he told her how, as he was on the point of making a confidant of Benvenuto, the goldsmith described to him his ideal love, and added that the favorite sculptor of Francois, by virtue of the king's word of honor to which he had never proved false, could obtain whatever he chose to ask after the statue of Jupiter was cast. As we know, the boon that Benvenuto proposed to ask was Colombe's hand. "O God, we have none to look to for succor but thee," said Colombe, raising her white hands and her lovely eyes to heaven. "All our friends are changed to enemies. Every haven of refuge becomes a dangerous reef. Are you certain that we are so utterly abandoned?" "Only too certain," replied Ascanio. "My master is as dangerous to us as your father, Colombe. Yes," he continued, wringing his hands, "I am almost driven to hate him, Benvenuto, my friend, my master, my protector, my father, my God. And yet I ask you, Colombe, why I should hear him ill will. because he has fallen under the spell to which every exalted mind that comes in contact with yours must yield, because he loves you as I love you. His crime is my own, after all. But you love me, Colombe, and so I am absolved. What shall we do? For 2 days I have been asking myself the question, and I do not know whether I begin to detest him, or whether I love him still. I feel that I would remorselessly sacrifice my heart's past for its future, earth for heaven. And why should he act differently? He is a man, and to renounce his love would be more than human. We must, therefore, fight it out. But how can I, feeble and alone as I am, resist him? But no matter, Colombe. Even if I should come some day to hate him I have loved so long and so well, I tell you now that I would not for all the world subject him to the torture he inflicted upon me the other morning when he declared his love for you. Meanwhile, Benvenuto, standing like a statue behind his tree, felt the drops of icy sweat roll down his forehead, and his hand clutched convulsively at his heart. Poor Ascanio! Dear heart, returned Colombe, you have suffered bitterly already, and have much to suffer still. But let us face the future calmly. Let us not exaggerate our griefs, for the prospect is not altogether desperate. Including God, there are 3 of us to make head against misfortune. You would rather see me Benvenuto's wife than Comte d'Aubec's, would you not? But you would also prefer to see me wedded to the Lord than to Benvenuto? Very well. If I am not yours, I will belong to none but the Lord. Be sure of that, Ascanio. Your wife in this world, or your betrothed in the other. That is my promise to you, Ascanio, and that promise I will keep, never fear. Thanks, thou angel from heaven, thanks, said Ascanio. Let us forget the great world around us, and concentrate our lives upon this little thicket where we now are. Colombe, you haven't told me yet that you love me. Alas, it would almost seem that you are mine because you could not do otherwise. Hush, Ascanio, hush. Do you not see that I am trying to sanctify my happiness by making it a duty? I love you, Ascanio, I love you. Benvenuto could no longer find strength to stand. He fell upon his knees with his head against a tree. His haggard eyes were fixed vacantly on space, while, with his head turned toward the young people, he listened with feverish intentness. Dear Colombe, echoed Ascanio, I love you, and something tells me that we shall be happy, and that the Lord will not abandon the loveliest of all his angels. Mon Dieu, mon Dieu. In this atmosphere of joy which surrounds me, I forget the circle of grief which I must enter when I leave you. We must think of tomorrow, said Colombe. Let us help ourselves, Ascanio, so that God may help us. It would be disloyal, I think, to leave your master Benvenuto in ignorance of our love, for he would perhaps incur great risk in contending against Madame d'Etampes and Comte d'Aubec. It would not be fair. You must tell him everything, Ascanio. I will obey you, dearest Colombe, for a word from you, as you must know, is law to me. My heart also tells me that you are right, always right, but it will be a terrible blow for him. Alas, I judge from my own heart. It is possible that his love for me may turn to hatred. It is possible that he will turn me out of doors. In that case, how can I, a stranger, without friends or shelter, resist such powerful enemies as the Duchesse d'Etampes and the king's treasurer? Who will help me to defeat the plans of that terrible couple? Who will fight on my side in this unequal struggle? Who will hold out a helping hand to me? I, said a deep, grave voice behind them. Benvenuto, cried the apprentice, without even turning round. Colombe shrieked and sprang to her feet. Ascanio gazed at his master, wavering between affection and wrath. Yes, it is I, Benvenuto Cellini, continued the goldsmith. I, whom you do not love, mademoiselle, I, whom you no longer love, Ascanio, and who come to save you both, nevertheless. What do you say? Cried Ascanio. I say that you must come and sit down again, here by my side, for we must understand one another. You have no need to tell me aught. I have not lost a word of your conversation. Forgive me for listening after I came upon you by chance, but you understand. It is much better that I should know all. You have said some things very sad and terrible for me to hear, but some kind things too. Ascanio was sometimes right and sometimes wrong. It is very true, mademoiselle, that I would have disputed you with him. But since you love him, that's the end of it. Be happy. He has forbidden you to love me, but I will force you to it by giving you to him. Dear master, cried Ascanio. You suffer, monsieur, do you not? Said Colombe, clasping her hands. Ow! Thanks, thanks, said Benvenuto, as his eyes filled with tears, but restraining his feelings with a mighty effort. You see that I suffer. He would not have noticed it, ungrateful boy. But nothing escapes a woman's eyes. Yes, I will not tell you a falsehood. I do suffer. And why not, since you are lost to me? But at the same time I am happy, because I am able to serve you. You will owe everything to me, and that thought comforts me a little. You were wrong, Ascanio. My Beatrice is jealous, and will brook no rival. You, Ascanio, must finish the statue of Hebe. Adieu, my sweetest dream, the last. Benvenuto spoke with effort, in a broken voice. Colombe leaned gracefully toward him, and put her hand in his. Weep, my friend, weep, she said softly. Yes, yes, said Cellini, bursting into tears. He stood for some time without speaking, weeping bitterly, and trembling with emotion from head to foot. His forceful nature gladly sought relief in tears too long held back. Ascanio and Colombe looked on in respectful silence at this exhibition of bitter grief. Except on the day when I wounded you, Ascanio, except at the moment when I saw your blood flow, I have not wept for 20 years. He said at last, recovering his self-control. But it has been a hard blow to me. I was in such agony just now behind those trees that I was tempted for a moment to plunge my dagger in my heart and end it all. The only thing that held my hand was your need of me, and so you saved my life. All is as it should be. After all, Ascanio has 20 years more happiness to give you than I have, Colombe. And then he is my child. You will be very happy together, and it will rejoice my father's heart. Benvenuto will succeed in triumphing over Benvenuto himself, as well as over his enemies. It is a lot of us creators to suffer, and perhaps each one of my tears will cause some lovely statue to spring up, as each of Dante's tears became a sublime strain. You see, Colombe, I am already returning to my old love, my cherished sculpture. That love will never forsake me. You did well to bid me weep. All the bitterness has been washed from my heart by my tears. I am sad still, but I am kind once more, and I will forget my pain in my efforts to save you. Ascanio took one of the master's hands and pressed it warmly in his own. Colombe took the other and put it to her lips. Benvenuto breathed more heavily than he had yet done. Shaking his head, he said with a smile, Do not make it harder for me, but spare me, my children. It will be better never to speak of this again. Henceforth, Colombe, I will be your friend, nothing more. I will be your father. The rest is all a dream. How let us talk of the danger which threatens you, and of what we are to do. I overheard you a moment since discussing your plans. Mon Dieu, you are very young, and neither of you has an idea of what life really is. You offer yourselves, in the innocence of your heart, to the cruel blows of destiny, unarmed, and you hope to vanquish malignity, avarice, all the vile passions of which man is capable with your kind hearts and your smiles. Dear fools, I will be strong and cunning and implacable in your stead. I am wonted to it, but you, God created you for happiness and tranquility, my lovely cherubs, and I will see to it that you fulfill your destiny. Ascanio, anger shall not furrow thy calm brow. Grief, Colombe, shall not disturb the pure outlines of thy face. I will take you in my arms, soft-eyed, charming pay. I will bear you so through all the mire and misery of life, and will not set you down until you have arrived safe and sound at perfect joy. And then I'll gaze at you and be happy in your happiness. But you must have blind confidence in me. I have my own peculiar ways, abrupt and hard to understand, and which may perhaps alarm you a little, Colombe. I conduct myself somewhat after the manner of artillery, and I go straight to my goal, heedless of what I may meet on the road. Yes, I think more of the purity of my intentions, I confess, than the morality of the means I use. When I set about modeling a beautiful figure, I care but little whether the clay soils my fingers. The figure finished. I wash my hands, and that's the end of it. Do you then, mademoiselle, with your refined and timorous heart, leave me to answer to God for my acts? He and I understand each other. I have a powerful combination to deal with. The Count is ambitious, the Provost avaricious, and the Duchess very subtle. They are each and all very powerful. You are in their power and in their hands, and two of them have rights over you. It may perhaps be necessary to resort to craft and violence. I shall arrange it, however, so that you and Ascanio will have no part in a contest in every way beneath you. Come, Colombe, are you ready to close your eyes and allow yourself to be led? When I say, do this, will you do it? Remain there. Will you remain? Go. Will you go? What does Ascanio say? Ask Colombe. Colombe, returned the apprentice. Benvenuto is great and good. He loves us and forgives the injury we have done him. Let us obey him, I implore you. Command me, master, said Colombe, and I will obey you as if you were sent by God himself. Ascanio, I propose to tell you how my Beatrice, the angel of whom I have spoken to you, came to be associated with my existence. You shall know who she was, and you will wonder less, no doubt, at my determination to abandon Colombe to you, when you realize that by its sacrifice I am but beginning to pay to the child the debt I owe the mother. Your mother, a saint in paradise, Ascanio. Beatrice would say blessed, Stefano would say crowned. You have always told me, master, that you would tell me your whole story some day. Yes, and the moment has come to redeem my promise. You will have even more confidence in me, Colombe, when you know the reasons I have for loving our Ascanio. Thereupon Benvenuto took a hand of each of his children in his own, and told them what follows, in his grave, melodious voice, beneath the glimmering stars in the peaceful silence of the night. Chapter 4, Stefana. 20 years since, I was 20 years old, as you are now, Ascanio, and I was at work with a Florentine goldsmith named Raphael del Moro. He was a good workman and did not lack taste, but he cared more for rest than for work, allowing himself to be inveigled into attending parties with disheartening facility, and, although he had little money, himself leading astray those who were in his studio. Very often I was left alone in the house, singing over some piece of work I had in hand. In those days I sang as Scotsone does. All the sluggards in the city came as a matter of course to Master Raphael for employment, or rather in quest of pleasure, for he had the reputation of being too weak ever to quarrel. One grows rich slowly with such habits as his. So he was always hard up, and soon came to be the most discredited goldsmith in Florence. With that exception, he was, as he himself said, very considerate and long-suffering. He loaned to everybody, compatriots and foreigners, Jews and Christians. He would have loaned to St. Peter upon the keys of paradise, or to Satan upon his estates in hell. Del Moro was a widower, but he had a daughter of 16, named Stefana. From a sculptor's point of view, Stefana was not beautiful, and yet her appearance was most striking. Beneath a forehead, which was almost too high and not smooth enough for a woman, one could see her brain at work, so to speak. Her great, moist eyes, of a velvety black hue, moved you to respect and deep emotion as they rested upon you. An ivory pallor overspread her face, which was lightened by a melancholy yet charming expression, like the faint sunshine of an autumn morning. I forget a crown of luxurious raven locks, and hands a queen might have envied. I was at this time an adventurous youth, an impulsive, giddy-pated creature. I loved liberty before everything. I was bubbling over with life, and I expended my surplus energy in foolish quarrels and foolish love affairs. I worked, nevertheless, with no less passion than I put into my pleasures, and despite my vagaries, I was Raphael's best workman, and the only one in the establishment who earned any money. But what I did well, I did by instinct, almost by chance. I had studied the ancients to good purpose. For whole days I had gazed upon the bas-reliefs and statues of Athens and Rome, making studies with pencil and chisel, and constant contact with these sublime artists of former days gave me purity and precision of outline, but I was simply a successful imitator. I did not create. Still, I say again, I was incontestably and easily the cleverest and most hard-working of Del Moro's comrades. I have since learned that the master's secret wish was that I should marry his daughter. Moreover, my feelings when I was with Stefano in no wise resembled those aroused by the pretty girls of Porta del Prado or Borgo Pindi. She almost overawed me. If I had been told I loved her otherwise than as an elder sister, I should have laughed. When I returned from one of my escapades, I dared not look Stefano in the face. She was more than stone. She was sad. On the other hand, when fatigue or a praiseworthy zealous impulse had detained me at home, I always sought Stefano's companionship, her sweet face, and her sweet voice. My affection for her had in it something serious and sacred, which I did not at the time fully understand, but which was very pleasant to me. Very often, amid my wildest excesses, the thought of Stefano would pass through my mind, and my companions would ask me why I had suddenly become thoughtful. Sometimes, when I was in the act of drawing my sword or my dagger, I would pronounce a name as it were that of my patron saint, and I noticed that whenever that occurred I retired from the contest unhurt. But this tender feeling for the dear child, innocent, lovely, and affectionate as she was, lay dormant at the bottom of my heart as in a sanctuary. For her part, it is certain that she was as full of indulgence and kindly feeling for me as she was cold and dignified with my slothful comrades. She sometimes came to sit in the studio beside her father, and I would sometimes feel her eyes fixed on my face as she bent over my work. I was proud and happy in her preference, although I did not explain my feeling to myself. If one of my comrades indulged in a little vulgar flattery and informed me that my master's daughter was in love with me, I received his insolence so roughly that he never repeated it. One day when she was in the studio looking at a piece of work, she did not take away her little white hand quickly enough, and a bungling workman, who was tipsy, I think, struck the little finger and the finger beside it with his chisel. The poor child shrieked at first, then, as if ashamed of it, smiled to reassure us, but her hand as she held it up was covered with blood. I think I should have killed the fellow had my mind not been concentrated upon her. Gismondo Gaddi, who was present, said that he knew a surgeon in the neighborhood and ran to fetch him. The villainous medic asked to dress the wound and came every day to see Stefano, but he was so ignorant and careless that gangrene set in. Thereupon he has pompously declared that, despite his efforts, Stefano's right arm would always be paralyzed. He set about dressing the poor maimed lingers, and Stefano was at once relieved. But a day or two later, it was necessary to remove the decayed bone. She asked me to be present at the operation to give her courage, whereas I was entirely lacking in it myself, and my heart felt very small in my breast. Master Giacomo made use of some great instrument, which caused Stefano terrible pain. She could not restrain her groans, which echoed in my heart. My temples were bathed in a cold perspiration. At last the torture exceeded my strength. The cruel tool which tortured those poor, delicate fingers tortured me no less. I rose, begging Master Giacomo to suspend the operation, and to wait for me a quarter of an hour. I went down to the studio, and there, as if inspired by my good genius, I made an instrument of thin, sharp steel which would cut like a razor. I returned to the surgeon, who with that operated so gently and easily that the dear girl felt almost no pain. In 5 minutes it was all over, and a fortnight later she gave me the hand to kiss, which, as she said, I had preserved. But it would be impossible for me to describe the poignant emotion I passed through when I saw the suffering of my poor resignee, as I sometimes called her. Resignation was, in truth, the natural condition of her mind. Stefano was not happy. Her father's improvidence and recklessness distressed her beyond measure. Her only consolation was religion. Like all unhappy women, she was pious. Very often, as I entered some church to pray, for I have always loved God, I would spy Stefano in a corner weeping and praying. Whenever, as too frequently happened, Master Del Moro's reckless extravagance left her penniless, she would appeal to me with a simple, trustful confidence, which went to my heart. She would say, "Dear girl," with a simplicity characteristic of noble hearts, "Benvenuto, I beg you to pass the night at work, to finish that reliquary, or that you, for we have no money at all." I remember one day when I showed her a medal which I was engraving for a cardinal, and which had a representation of the cardinal's head on one side, and on the other Jesus walking on the sea, and holding out his hand to St. Peter, with this legend, quae jubitasti? Wherefore didst thou doubt? Stephano was well pleased with the portrait, which was a very good likeness, and very well executed. She looked at the reverse in silence for a long while. The face of our Lord is very beautiful, she said at last, and if it were intended for Apollo or Jupiter, I should find nothing to criticize. But Jesus is something more than beautiful. Jesus is divine. The lines of this face are superb in their purity, but where's the soul? I admire the man, but I look in vain for the God. Consider, Benvenuto, that you are not an artist simply, but a Christian as well. My heart, you know, has often bled. That is to say, alas, my heart has often doubted. And I, too, have shaken off my depression when I saw Jesus holding out his hand to me and have heard the sublime words, "Wherefore hast thou doubted?" Ah, Benvenuto, your image of him is less beautiful than he. Wait a moment. Stephana, said I effaced what I had done, and in a few moments I once more began upon the Saviour's face under her eyes. Oh, yes, she replied, with tears in her eyes. So our blessed Lord appeared to me when I was heavy-hearted. Yes, I recognize him now by his expression of compassion and majesty. Ah, Benvenuto, I advise you always henceforth to follow this course. Before taking the wax in hand, be sure of the thought. You possess the instrument, master the expression. You have the material part, seek the spiritual part. Let your fingers never be aught but the servants of your mind. Mon Dieu, how lovely is youth, and how its memories do overpower one. Ascanio, Colombe. This lovely evening we are passing together reminds me of all those I passed by Stephana's side sitting upon a bench outside her father's house. She would gaze up at the sky, and I would gaze at her. It was 20 years ago, but it seems only yesterday. I put out my hand and fancy that I can feel hers, but it is yours, my children. What God does is well done. Oh, simply to see her in her white dress was to feel tranquility steal over my soul. Often when we parted we had not uttered a word, and yet I carried away from those silent interviews all sorts of fine and noble thoughts, which made me better and greater. But all this had an end, as all happiness in this world has. Raphael del Moro had but little farther to go to reach the lowest depths of destitution. He owed his kind neighbor Gismondo Gatti 2,000 ducats, which he knew not how to pay. The thought drove this honest man to desperation. He wished at least to save his daughter, and entrusted his purpose to give her to me to one of the workmen, doubtless that he might broach the subject to me. But he was one of the idiots whom I had lost my temper with when they threw Stephana's sisterly affection at my head as a reproach. The blockhead did not even allow Raphael to finish. Abandon that scheme, Master del Moro, he said. The suggestion would not be favorably received, my word for it. The goldsmith was proud. He believed that I despised him on account of his poverty, and he never referred to the subject again. Some time after, Gismondo Gatti came to demand payment of his debt, and when Raphael asked for more time, "Hark ye," said Gismondo, "give me your daughter's hand, and I will give you a receipt in full." After all, Stephana must know that an artist's instincts and temperament do not easily accommodate themselves to the rigid bonds, the commonplace necessities of family life. I must say farewell to all my dreams of glory, renounce the thought of making my name famous, and abandon art, which thrives on liberty and power. How can one create when held a prisoner at the domestic fireside? Say, O Dante Alighieri, O Michelangelo, my master, how you would laugh to see your pupil rocking his children to sleep and asking his wife's pardon. No, I will be brave in my own behalf, and generous to Stephana. Sad and alone I will dream out my dream and fulfill my destiny. You see, my children, that I make myself no better than I am. There was some selfishness in my decision, but there was also much deep and sincere affection for Stephana, and my ravings seemed to border closely on common sense. In a week, Benvenuto, I shall be Gismondo Gatti's wife. I was destined never to see her more in this world. This time again I left the city bareheaded and running like a madman, but I did not return the next day, or the next. I kept on until I reached Rome. I remained at Rome 5 years. I laid the foundation of my reputation. I won the friendship of the rope. I had jewels and love affairs and artistic success. But I was not contented. Something was lacking. Amid my engrossing occupations, I never passed a day without turning my eyes toward Florence. There was no night when I did not see in my dream Stephana, pale-faced and sad, standing in the doorway of her father's house and gazing at me. After 5 years, I received a letter from Florence, sealed with black. I read and reread it so many times that I know it now by heart. It ran thus: Benvenuto, I am dying. Benvenuto, I loved you. I had long since become accustomed to your lamentable absences from home, to all the exact irons of your impulsive nature, to all the whims of your tempest-loving heart. Every powerful temperament has pressing needs. The longer the eagle has soared aloft, the longer he is obliged to rest on earth. But when you had torn yourself free from the feverish dreams of your genius, I would have found once more at the awakening my sublime Benvenuto, whom I love so dearly, and who would have belonged to me alone. I would never have reproached you for the hours of neglect, for they would have contained no insult for me. For my own part, knowing you to be jealous, as is every noble heart, jealous as the god of Holy Writ, I would have remained in seclusion when you were away, in the solitude which I love, awaiting your return and praying for you. Such would my life have been. But when I saw that you abandoned me, I bowed submissively to God's will and yours, closed my eyes, and placed my fate in the hands of duty. My father ordered me to enter into a marriage which would save him from dishonor, and I obeyed. My husband has been harsh, stern, pitiless. He has not been content with my docile submission, but demanded a love beyond my power to give, and punished me brutally for my involuntary sadness. I resign myself to endure everything. I have been, I trust, a pure and dignified spouse, but always very sad at heart. Benvenuto. God has rewarded me, however, even in this world, by giving me a son. My child's kisses have for 4 years past prevented me from feeling insults, blows, and last of all, poverty. For my husband ruined himself trying to gain too much, and he died last month from chagrin at his ruin. May God forgive him as I do. I shall be dead myself within the hour, dead from the effects of my accumulated suffering, and I bequeath my son to you, Benvenuto. Perhaps all is for the best. Who can say if my womanly weakness would have been equal to the task I would have undertaken with you? He, my Ascanio, he is like me, will be a stronger and more submissive companion for you. He will love you better, if not more dearly. I am not jealous of him. Adieu, my friend. I loved you and I love you still, and I tell you without shame or remorse, at the very doors of eternity, for my love was holy. Adieu, be great, and I shall be happy. Raise your eyes sometimes to heaven that I may see you. Your Stephana. Now, Colombe and Ascanio, will you have confidence in me, and are you ready to do what I advise? On the day following that on which the story was told in the garden of the Pettinesal, by the moon's pale light, Benvenuto's studio wore its accustomed aspect. The master was working at the gold salt dish, the material for which he had so valiantly defended against the four bravos, who strove to take it from him, and his life with it. Ascanio was chiseling Madame d'Etampes' lily. Jack Aubrey, reclining lazily on a lounging chair, was putting question after question to Cellini, who paid no attention to him, and imposed upon the inquisitive student the necessity of framing his own replies. Pagolo was gazing at Catherine, who was busy with some woman's work. Herman and the others were filing, welding, chiseling, and Scottsone's joyous singing furnished the element of cheerfulness in this tranquil, busy scene. There all was excitement and apprehension. They were seeking her everywhere and calling her name. Dame Perini was shrieking at the top of her voice, and the provost, who had been sent for in hot haste, was trying to lay hold upon something, in the midst of the good woman's lamentations, which might put him on the track of the absent one, who was in all probability a fugitive. Alas! Yes, Messiah, Jesus die you. What a misfortune! The poor, dear child seemed a bit cast down as she went to take off all her beautiful court fixings. She put on a simple white dress, Saints in paradise, have pity on us. And then she said to me, Dame Perini, it's a lovely evening, and I will go and take a turn or two in my path. It might have been about 7 o'clock. Madam here, added Perini, pointing to Poultry, the woman who had been installed as her assistant or superior. Madam here had already gone to her room, doubtless to work at those lovely dresses which you make so well, and I was at work sewing in the room below. I don't know how long I remained there. It is possible that after a while my poor tired eyes closed in spite of me, and that I lost myself a moment. As usual, interposed Poultry sharply. And this morning, the provost broke in impatiently. This morning when I found that she didn't come down, Holy Virgin help us. To the devil with your litanies, cried Messiah d'Estourville. Say what you have to say simply and without all these jeremiads. This morning. Ah, Monsieur le Prévôt, you can't prevent my weeping until she is found. This morning, Messiah, being alarmed at not seeing her, she is always so early. I knocked at her door to wake her, and, as she did not answer, I opened the door. No one. The bed was not even rumpled. Messiah. With that I called and cried, and lost my head, and you want me not to weep. I admit anyone. The idea, rejoined the governess with every indication of stupefaction, feeling a little conscience-stricken in that regard. Didn't you forbid me, Messiah? Since when, pray, have I allowed myself to disobey your orders? Admit someone? Oh yes, of course. This Benvenuto, for instance, who had the assurance to deem my daughter so fair, has he never tried to buy you? Good lack, he would have been more likely to try to fly to the moon. I would have received him prettily, I promise you. I am to understand, then, that you have never admitted a young man, to the petit nestle. A young man, merciful heaven, a young man, why not the devil himself? Pray, who is a handsome boy, said Poultry, who has knocked at the door at least 10 times since I have been here, and in whose face I have shut the doors often. A handsome boy? Your sight must be poor, my dear, unless it was Comte d'Aubec. Bondi you. I know. You may mean Ascanio. You know Ascanio, Messiah? The young fellow who saved your life. Yes, I did give him my shoe buckles to repair. But that apprentice, wear glasses. My love, may these walls and pavement speak, if they ever saw him here. Enough, interposed the provost severely. If you have betrayed my confidence, Dame Perini, I swear that you shall pay me for it. I am going now to this Benvenuto. God knows how the clown will receive me, but go I must. Contrary to his expectation, Benvenuto received the provost with perfect civility. In the face of his cool and easy manner and his good humor, Messiah de Seville did not dare mention his suspicions, but he said that his daughter, having been unnecessarily alarmed the evening before, had fled in a panic terror like a mad girl, that it was possible that she might have taken refuge in the Grand Nestle without Benvenuto's knowledge, or else that she might have fainted somewhere in the grounds as she was passing through. In short, he lied in the most bungling way imaginable. But Cellini courteously accepted all his fables and all his excuses. Indeed, he was so obliging as to appear to notice nothing out of the way. He did more. He sympathized with the provost with all his heart, declaring that he would be happy to assist in restoring his daughter to a father who had always hedged her around with such touching affection. To hear him, one might suppose the fugitive was very much in the wrong, and could not too soon return to so pleasant a home and so loving a parent. Moreover, to prove the sincerity of his interest in Messiah d'Estourville's affliction, he placed himself at his disposal to assist him in his search in the Grand Nestle and elsewhere. The provost, half convinced, and the more deeply affected by these eulogiums, in that he knew in his heart that he did not deserve them, began a careful search of his former property, of which he knew all the ins and outs. There was not a door that he did not open, not a wardrobe nor chest into which he did not peer, as if by inadvertence. Having inspected every nook and corner of the hotel itself, he went into the garden and searched the arsenal, foundry, stables, and cellar, scrutinizing everything most rigorously. Benvenuto, faithful to his first offer, accompanied him throughout his investigations, and assisted him to the utmost of his ability, offering him all the keys and calling his attention to this or that corridor or closet which the provost overlooked. He advised him to leave one of his people on guard in each spot as he left it, lest the fugitive should evade him by stealing from place to place. Having continued his perquisitions for 2 hours to no purpose, Messiah d'Estorville, feeling sure that he had omitted nothing, and overwhelmed by his host's politeness, left the Grand Nestle, with profuse thanks and apologies to its master. "Whenever it suits your pleasure to return," said the goldsmith, "and if you desire to renew investigations here, my house is open to you at all times, as when it was your own. Indeed, it is your right, Messiah. Did we not sign a treaty whereby we agreed to live on neighborly terms?" The provost thanked Benvenuto, and as he knew not how to return his courtesy, he loudly praised, as he went away, the colossal statue of Mars, which the artist was at work upon, as we have said. Benvenuto led him around it, and complacently called his attention to its amazing proportions. It was more than 60 feet high and nearly 20 in circumference at its base. Messiah d'Estorville withdrew much dejected. As he had failed to find his daughter in the precincts of the Grand Nestle, he was convinced that she had found shelter somewhere in the city. But even at that time, the city was sufficiently large to make his own task as chief officer of the police an embarrassing one. Then, too, there was this question to be solved. Had she been kidnapped, or had she fled? Was she the victim of some other person's violence, or had she yielded to her own impulse? There was nothing to set at rest his uncertainty upon this point. He hoped that in the first event she would succeed in escaping, and in the second would return of her own volition. He therefore waited with what patience he could muster, none the less questioning Dame Perini 20 times a day, who passed the time calling upon the saints in paradise, and swearing by all the gods that she had admitted no one. And indeed she was no more suspicious than Messiah d'Estorville himself of Ascanio. That day and the next passed without news. The provost thereupon put all his agents in the field, a thing he had hitherto omitted to do, in order that the unfortunate occurrence, in which his reputation was so deeply interested, might not be noised abroad. To be sure, he simply gave them Colombe's description, without giving them a name, and their investigations were made upon an entirely different pretext from the real one. But although he resorted to all his secret sources of information, all their searching was without result. The provost was dazzled at the honor which might be in store for him. His anger redoubled, and he cursed the ungrateful girl who was ruining her own chances of such a noble destiny. We spare our readers the details of the conversation between the 2 old courtiers to which this avowal of Comte d'Aubec led. We will say simply that grief and hope were combined therein in a curiously touching way, as misfortune brings men together. The prospective father-in-law and son-in-law parted more closely united than ever, and without making up their minds to renounce the brilliant prospect of which they had caught a glimpse. They agreed to keep the occurrence secret from everybody, but the Duchesse d'Etampes was too intimate a friend and too deeply interested as an accomplice not to be let into their confidence. It was a wise move on their part, for she took the thing much more to heart than the father and husband had done, and, as we know, she was better qualified than any other to give the provost information and direct his search. She knew of Ascanio's love for Colombe, and she had herself forced him, so to speak, to listen to the whole conspiracy. The young man, realizing the blow was to be aimed at the honor of his beloved, had perhaps resolved upon some desperate act. But Ascanio had himself told her that Colombe did not love him, and not loving him she would be unlikely to lend herself to such a design. Now the Duchesse d'Etampes knew him upon whom her suspicion first fell sufficiently well to be sure that he would never have the courage to defy his mistress's scorn and her resistance, and yet, despite all her reasoning, and although in her eyes all the probabilities pointed to Ascanio's innocence, her jealous instinct told her that Colombe must be sought at the Hotel de Nesle, and that they must make sure of Ascanio before everything. But, on the other hand, Madame d'Etampes could not tell her friends the source of that conviction, for she must in that case confess her love for Ascanio, and that, in the imprudence of a passion, she had made known to him all her designs upon Colombe. She simply said to them that she would be very much mistaken if Benvenuto were not the culprit, Ascanio his accomplice, and the grandness of the place of concealment. To no purpose did the provost argue with her, and swear that he had inspected and searched every corner. She would not yield her point, saying that she had her reasons for the faith that was in her, and she was so obstinate in her opinion that she ended by arousing suspicion in the mind of Messiah d'Esterville, who was certain nevertheless that he had made a thorough search. "However," said the Duchess, "I will send for Ascanio. I will see him and question him myself, never fear." "Oh, madam, you are too kind," said the provost. "And you too stupid," muttered the Duchess between her teeth. She dismissed them and set about reflecting upon the method she should adopt to induce the young man to come to her. But before she had decided upon any, Ascanio was announced. It was as if he had anticipated her wish. "Madam," said he, as he saluted her, "I have come to show you your lily, which is almost finished. Almost nothing is lacking to complete it save the 200,000 crown dewdrop you promised to furnish me." "If you mean Mademoiselle d'Esterville, madam," rejoined Ascanio gravely, "I will beg you on my knees not to pronounce her name again before me. Yes, madam, I most humbly and earnestly implore you that this subject may never be mentioned between us, in pity's name. Whatever the feeling which influences me, madam, and though I were to be disgraced in your eyes, I shall venture to decline hereafter to talk with you upon this subject. I have sworn a solemn oath that everything connected with that memory shall be dead and buried in my heart." "Am I mistaken?" thought the Duchess. "And has Ascanio no part in this transaction? Can it be that the child has followed some other adorer, voluntarily or perforce, and, although lost in my ambitious schemes, has served the interest of my passion by a flight?" Having indulged in these reflections beneath her breath, she continued, aloud, "Ascanio, you beg me not to speak of her again, but you will at least allow me to speak of yourself. You see that in obedience to your entreaty I do not insist, but who knows if this second subject will not be even more disagreeable to you than the first? Who knows? I am as terrified as a dwarf awaking to find himself among giants. I haven't an idea in its place, not a feeling which I can explain. I feel lost among all these terrible animosities, all these implacable passions, all these soaring ambitions. Madam, give me time to breathe. I conjure you. Permit the poor shipwrecked wretch to collect his thoughts, the convalescent to recover his strength. Time, I hope, will restore order in my mind and my life. Time, madam, give me time, and in pity's name see in me today only the artist who comes to ask if his lily is to your taste." The Duchess stared at Ascanio in doubt and amazement. She had not supposed that this young man, this child, was capable of speaking in this grave, stern, poetic fashion. She felt morally constrained to obey him, and confined her conversation to the lily, praising and advising Ascanio, and promising to do her utmost to send him very soon the large diamond to complete his work. Ascanio thanked her, and took his leave with every mark of gratitude and respect. "Can that be Ascanio?" said Madame d'Etampes to herself when he had gone. "He seems 10 years older. What gives him this almost imposing gravity? Is it suffering? Is it happiness? Is he sincere? In short, or acting under the influence of that accursed Benvenuto? Is he playing a part with the talent of a consummate artist, or is he simply following his own nature?" And was perplexed. The strange vertigo which gradually overpowered all those who contended with Benvenuto Cellini began to steal over her, despite her strength of mind. She set spies upon Ascanio, who followed him on the rare occasions when he left the studio, but that step led to no result. At last she sent for the Provost and Comte d'Ilbec, and advised them, as another would have ordered, to make a second and unexpected domiciliary visit to the Grand Nestle. He was very happy that he happened to be at home to do honor to his guests, for he was to start that same day within 2 hours for Romorantin, having been named by Francois I, in his condescension, as one of the artists who were to go to meet the emperor. However, they decided to go through with their perquisition, and set about it with painstaking minuteness. Benvenuto accompanied them at first, but as he saw that their investigations were likely to be very prolonged, he asked their permission to leave them, and returned to the studio to give some orders to his workmen, as he was to take his leave very soon, and desired to find the preparations for casting his Jupiter finished at his return. He did in fact return to the studio, and distributed the work among his men, bidding them obey Ascanio as if he were himself. He then said a few words in Italian in Ascanio's ear, bade them all adieu, and prepared to take his departure. A horse all settled, and held by little Johann, awaited him in the outer courtyard. At that moment Scott's own went up to Benvenuto and took him aside. "Do you know, master," she said with a sober face, "that your departure leaves me in a very difficult position. Pagolo is becoming fonder of me all the time." "Ah, is it so?" "What do you reply?" "Dame, as you bade me, master, I say that I will see, and that perhaps it may be arranged." "How is it very well?" "You don't understand, Benvenuto, that he takes everything that I say to him most seriously, and that I may be entering into a real engagement with him. It's a fortnight since you laid down a rule of conduct for me to adopt, is it not?" "Yes, I think so. I hardly remember. But I have a better memory than you. During the first 5 days, I replied by reasoning gently with him. I told him he must try to conquer his passion and love me no more. The next 5 days, I listened in silence, and that was a very compromising kind of an answer, but you bade me do it, so I did it. Since then, I have been driven to talk of my duty to you. And yesterday, master, I reached a point where I besought him to be generous, while he pressed me to confess my love for him." "Ah, at last," said Scott's own. "Yes, now listen, little one. During the first 3 days of my absence, you will let him think that you love him. During the next 3, you will confess your love." "What? You bid me do that, Benvenuto?" cried Scott's own, deeply wounded at the master's too great confidence in her. "Mon Dieu, nothing, I know," said Scott's own, "but being placed as I am between your indifference and his love, I may end by falling in love with him outright." "Nonsense. In 6 days? Aren't you strong enough to remain indifferent to him 6 days?" "Yes, indeed. I give you 6 days, but don't remain away 7, I beg you." "No fear, my child, I will return in time. Adieu, Scott's own." While Cellini was giving Catherine these instructions, the provost and Dorbeck returned to the studio. When they were left to themselves, with unrestricted freedom of movement, they went about their search in a sort of frenzy. They explored the garrets and cellars, sounded all the walls, moved all the furniture. They detained all the servants they met, and displayed the ardor of creditors with the patience of hunters. 100 times they retraced their steps, examining the same thing again and again, like a sheriff's officer with a writ to serve, and when they had finished they were flushed and excited, but had discovered nothing. "Well, messrs," said Benvenuto, preparing to mount his horse, "you found nothing, eh? So much the worse. So much the worse. I understand what a painful thing it must be for turn-sensitive hearts like yours, but notwithstanding my sympathy with your suffering and my desire to assist in your search, I must bug on. If you feel called upon to visit the Grand Nestle in my absence, do not hesitate, but make yourself perfectly at home here. I have given orders that the house be open to you at all times. My only consolation for leaving you in so anxious a frame of mind is the hope that I shall learn upon my return that you have found your daughter, Monsieur le Prévôt, and you your fair fiancé, Monsieur Dorbeck. Adieu, messrs." Thereupon he turned to his companions, who were standing in a group at the door, all save Ascanio, who doubtless did not care to stand face to face with his rival. "Adieu, my children," he said. "If during my absence Monsieur le Prévôt desires to inspect my house a 3rd time, do not forget to receive him as its former master." With that little Johann threw open the door, and Benvenuto galloped away.